Okay. So we start. Είμαστε έτοιμοι?
Maybe you are. I suggest about how the learning started. How you met each other? What is the motive for this? Maybe it's okay. Started historical.
Okay. So it's a Zoom inside a Zoom. We welcome you in the second part of our all-day workshop program, which is a presentation of this knowledge exchange program that we did with MOBA network. This exchange was possible through a grant that we took from Fund Action Rethink 2020, and we thank them for this for the possibility, and also Ethereum Space for being here. When we applied in 2020 for this grant, it was just before the pandemic in February, and we had in mind to do some visits in each of the cities that the MOBA members are. We were very interested in the MOBA network, which is European Cooperative Society of Housing Cooperatives. So its members are from Central East Europe, from Prague, Ljubljana, Zagreb, and Belgrade, and Budapest. Okay, so our interest in this network is that stems from the fact that we face very similar challenges, which is the lack of institutional framework that supports housing cooperatives, the lack of similar experiences of this type of cooperative housing, and also the difficulties in to find the funding from ethical banks or whatever. So it's a situation quite different from the paradigms that inspired us in the beginning as CoHab Athens from Zurich or Germany. And we thought that we could learn a lot from these projects that are in the beginning, they start from scratch. So we planned in the beginning to do these visits in each of the city and to do this knowledge exchange live, but the pandemic came and all this knowledge exchange was transferred online. So we did some video interviews with each of the members and the group interview, which we saw in the beginning. This is the closing, let's say, of this exchange. it closes with the presentation of these video interviews and with this discussion that we will do, and which is also planned to be a live discussion. But we think that it is only the beginning, because through these interviews, we learned a lot, and we think that this is the beginning of building bigger synergies and collaborations. Sorry. So I will start what we learned about MOBA and about each of its projects. When we started the interviews, personally, I thought that most of these projects were realized, or at least in the construction phase. We discovered that there are small projects that only Budapest paradigm was already had managed to acquire a building, and the rest were in a development phase. There were pilot projects. They were all put forward by a small group of very dedicated, very enthusiastic with the idea people. And we thought that we could find ourselves between them and to become a MOBA member in the future. So the first thing that we get from these interviews is some hope for the future, that despite being small projects of a few people, actually, each of these projects, they managed to make this European cooperative society to be actors in a European level. And of course, this May, they had their first, let's say, registered official success of implementing a real project, buying the first house in Prague through a MOBA fund. So the MOBA fund, and we want to hear more about this next from Anna and Susie. The second thing is where you start when you start from scratch, where nothing is there in place, where there are no paradigms of housing cooperatives in the country. In some cases, it was a big kickoff event, like in the case of Belgrade, that it was an open call for people to gather together, and they worked through open workshops, and Anna will tell us more about this. For the Ljubljana team, it was a conference and a workshop with the Faculty of Architecture. For the group of Prague, it was Mitsko's presentation in a club in Prague. So there is some big event in the beginning of each group, and our experience is also quite similar in this, because for us, our first kickoff event, it was a workshop in Venice Biennale, where we had invited representatives from Zurich, from initiatives from Zurich and Germany, to discuss together if a pilot project of this type could be realized in Athens. And the small backstage information about this is that in this 2016 Venice Biennale workshop, we had got an email from a girl from Ljubljana, Masa, and 5 years after, we were in the position to interview Masa as a representative of Zadrugator, a project, a MOBA project. So we found ourselves together again. So it's very important, these events, that we discuss together, meet together, and spread the idea more. Another thing that makes this project begin and start, we saw in common, it was the common experiences of living together in shared flats, etc. Another thing which is common through these interviews, that all these projects are not just about housing, or they are not just about affordable or cheap housing. Most of them have started from movements and with more broader interest about housing, about promoting another way of living, more ecological, more sustainable, more with more social justice, etc. So it's also a term in, it's a prerequisite to become a MOBA member, to follow these principles, to have a broader reach and broader goal that, rather than just providing affordable or cheap housing. So cooperative housing was the answer, but the question was not just cheap or affordable housing. Cooperative housing came quite later in all these groups as a solution that could somehow sum up all these possible other ways of living. One other thing is that in our cases, the state is not a trustworthy actor, or the municipality. There may be some discussions with the municipality, that the municipality promised some things, or in the case of Ljubljana, for example, they worked out a draft law that could have some favorable conditions for housing cooperatives that could allow municipalities to offer land with a very low or even free lease. When the government changed this law, this draft law remained in the drawer. So we can't trust the state, we can't trust the municipality, even if we collaborate with it. So we have to build our projects, whatever the municipality is, whatever the state is, we can't wait some help from them. And these changes in the law or in the government must be incorporated in our plans. The other thing is the legal improvisation. Our inspiration comes from the same paradigms, from the cooperatives of Zurich or Michigan Syndicate, which have a legal environment which is very friendly to this type of projects. We don't have any such provisions in our law. We have these legal forms of the association, of the social enterprise, the social cooperative, or the non-profit organization. We have to work with this and create new forms, new legal forms to apply to this, to find the legal hacks that will enable us to make non-profit housing for the future. And what we see in most of these examples is that there is a combination of legal forms. There is a complex legal structure. Usually there is an association, which is the broader umbrella organization, and the cooperative, a for-profit form that owns the house, or an association. And the one participates in the other in many variations according to the case. And usually, because the association is the easier form to make, comes first. And then when when they are ready to buy the house, or the project is more concrete, they form the cooperative that will manage the house and who will own the house. Another thing is the communication of the project is very crucial in all these paradigms, because it's something new. It's a pioneering in our countries. We have to work on the advocacy, and actually most of our work is on the advocacy, both for us and also for them. And it's very important to do this work. It's not easy for people that are interested to live now in a house collectively to do this work, because it is a professional work. It needs knowledge of the laws and the financial situation. And so what we do is to split the functions, to have some people that deal with this, let's say, more professionally, but still voluntarily. And this is the problem that all of our projects face, that we're all volunteers in these projects. They depend on our will to spend our free time on this, and to have to approach the people when we are more ready with the project, when you have formed the details of this. So this is a small intro of what we saw through the interview, some common friends. And I want to pass the floor to Anna and tell us her experiences from inside.
Hi, everyone, and nice to see you all like this over Zoom. Sorry not to be with you in Athens. This month of May and June are super busy for all of us in MOBA, so we could not join you there in person, but this technology bridges this discrepancy. It was really interesting to have this exchange with CoHab Athens, because when we started MOBA, we have been thinking about what is our geographic region, what is the let's say, geographic territory that MOBA is covering, and somehow the obvious link where the places that had a similar history also in terms of, let's say, a lot of societally owned or state-owned housing, which was in the socialist period in all of our countries, let's say, formed about, let's say in Serbia, about 50% of housing, and then sudden privatization of the 90s that made in all of our countries actually complete shift in the ownership structure. So this is one of the common things that connects us all, that most of our countries where MOBA is active have basically no social housing or very little social housing, in any case not enough to house all the people that would need let's say, affordable forms of housing that cannot just like that enter the market. So I think that is one of the important elements, maybe to add to what you have already explained, what is that connects us. And then when exchanging with CoHab Athens, we realized also that outside of the, let's say, past socialist, post-socialist countries, there are also other countries like Greece, which have also similar ownership structure and lack of institutional framework for other forms than market-driven forms. And that, I think that is quite interesting, and we should also maybe then reconsider our geographic focus and think about MOBA in a slightly different way. I don't know if you have some specific thing that you would like me to pick on, or you would like more to hear where we stand now and what has happened. Okay, so what has happened ever since we spoke, because it has been a year that we did, or more than a year that we did this interview. And of course, a lot of stuff has been moving on. What is maybe the most exciting about what we have been doing here in Belgrade is that we started last year to work with two concrete groups of people, which seemed at that point very ready to initiate cooperative housing. One was, to our surprise, actually, when we started with the idea of finding an alternative to the market-driven housing, we were mostly thinking of younger people and who are, let's say, for the first time looking for their house. But what turned out is that there is a group of seniors that has approached us somewhere in the beginning of last year with the idea to form a community. In the beginning, that they have been thinking of living in the city, but as the COVID pointed out also to possibilities of living outside, they started to think of an eco-community of seniors that would have, let's say, the multi-generational program or some kind of facilities, and that would bring solidarity of people, both in financial terms, but also in caring for each other, and that this group would be somewhere from 60 to 80 and plus years old. So we started to work with this group of people, and it proved that it is more difficult than it seemed in the very beginning, because there is, let's say, not such a big alignment among this group, what exactly is, where this project should take place, how people should contribute. And also, we also conducted last year quite a big survey, quite a thorough, let's say, survey in this group, where we were figuring out how ready they are for this form of living. And it shows that of 30, 40 people that initially were showing interest, in the end, it boils down to 5, 6 people that are really seriously interested. And this is, I think, one of the things that when you start really to go into details, when you really start to delve into it deeply, it shows more, let's say, maybe not to use the term difficult, but there are more steps necessary to make than it was originally looking. And then another interesting thing is that we started with a group which is quite related to what we do. One of our members is also part of it, which is called Škograd, which is an initiative that works in an informal suburb of Belgrade with mainly with children, and mainly this is connected to a local school there, which became quite segregated. Only basically last 3 generations, only Roma kids are going to this school. And this group was interested to form a cooperative housing in this neighborhood related to this school. And then as we were working on this, there was an opportunity to buy a land in this area. And that was another interesting challenge, that it proved too early in the process to think of buying actually land before figuring out all the other details. And somehow that project was shaken. And meanwhile, we decided that the original founders of because we also formed the cooperative. We started with an association, formed the cooperative, that the original founders of our cooperative are interested to actually really push the project together, not just that we work with other people, that we want to be also inhabitants of such a cooperative. So now we are in the, let's say, restarting phase of that. So you can see that there is a lot of going up and down, and a lot of work actually necessary to connect the dots and put things on the ground. Another interesting thing that happened is that for the first time we got some interest shown from the institutions to this form of housing. And there was 2 months ago a National Urban Forum here in Belgrade, where we had an opportunity to present all that we have been developing so far. And also, I think very important thing that we are working on is an ecosystem of cooperative housing. So here locally, we have an association, we have a cooperative that we form, we have these groups that we're working with. There is also a larger umbrella, which is called the Movement for Housing Equality, which connects 5 organizations. But we have been all the time lacking this connection with institutions. And at least now it seems that there is a little bit of a door open to at least talk further. So I would say these are updates on my side, on our side here, from Who Builds the City and Cooperative Smarter Building. And maybe later we can speak more about MOBA.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Anna, very much. And we are very glad for that you proceeded with all these groups, and it's nice to hear that all this work is done in a different, in also a difficult period, which is the COVID period. And I also wanted to ask about your energy community project, if it is connected with all these projects. Or maybe just a short comment now before we walk on, maybe to Rock, because Rock doesn't have a lot of time.
Okay. Should I just mention, I'm part of also one of the founders of energy cooperative called Electropioneer, and we have connections with the housing cooperative, but not really directly. It's like not intertwined entirely. But of course, there are connections. And another interesting thing is that since last also about 2 months, we have started an exchange here how to connect different cooperatives in Belgrade and in Serbia, especially new cooperatives that have grown in urban context, because we have a lot of, let's say, agriculture cooperatives, also like student cooperatives that provide work. But there are new kinds of cooperatives which try to provide the context for new sort of solidary economy. And this is also an exciting thing that started to happen, and we will have an event on Monday related to this.
That builds between different cooperatives with different functions. Okay,
yeah, different cooperatives and solidarity economy initiatives.
Okay, we will discuss about them more next, and maybe Roque is ready. Roque? Or Jussi? I propose the Roque because Roque is for a very short time. Thank you, Roque, for being here, for managing finally to be with us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us, and it's really a pleasure to be with you. And I think I'll make it until the end of the event. And as Anna said, I'm also really, really sorry we can't be with you in Athens, both because all of you and because of Athens as such. Maybe to give an update, also, maybe I would start, Konstantina, where you stopped about, or where you mentioned the Zadrugator about this. You know, for us, it has always been extremely important to work with public stakeholders. We see housing co-ops really on sort of crossroads or intersection between public and private. We have two main reasons for that. Firstly, because we believe these are strong. It's a strong way, and in that way you can build strong mechanisms to prevent speculative type of behavior and build mechanism according to that. And secondly, because this not more than anything else directs or enables accessibility. In terms, like when I say accessibility, I mean it reduces the cost of establishing and cost of running, and also then leading to reduction of cost of the rent, making it accessible to much wider spectrum of people, no matter their monthly incomes or their wealth. So that is why it was always very, very important for us to work, as I started to say, with public partners, and because we do not have in Slovenia a regulatory environment or laws that would talk about housing cooperatives, much less to enable or even support them. It was always our ambition and our goal to work with the government, with ministries or other public institutions, and try to establish something like that. I think in many ways we were working quite well, but as Konstantina, you mentioned at the beginning, we had a change in government 2 years ago, and everything came to a full stop. Now, 2 years later, we have a new government. So who knows? I'll return to but yeah, we had in the meantime this, let's call it crisis management. What we try to do is figure out, is there not a way we can still do this without support of the state? Maybe just with support of municipality or any other local actors, or even without them. This was one goal, and the other goal was, let's prepare for the very likely eventuality that the government will soon change. So when it does, let's be ready as much as possible. So in terms of, we've been working on many, many different things. Also many different things together with MOBA, but I'll focus just on the ones we did alone. So we've been working on trying to develop internal legal documentations, everything from statutes to other types. We've been developing this, how to call it, internal accounting system, financial models, again, on two ways. As I said before, to see if it's possible to have such a thing, even possible, or to have it in an affordable way without support of the state. And in that sense, I might say we were not successful, or we were successful in figuring it out that it's not really possible without the support of the state, public actors, or if we were to get a very large private donation from somebody. But I think we never want to rely on something like that, because even if we would be so lucky one time, this is not something that could work on a systemic and long-term basis. at least until we really grow on a national scale and international scale. And perhaps later on we can talk about this scaling up. Yeah, and also we were working then on developing a new law. As we said, as you mentioned earlier, with the previous government, we were helping them, kind of directing them in when they were changing the law on housing to also include housing cooperatives there, just basically to define them, to give certain rights to cooperatives, certain benefits, but of course also certain obligations. We also think that part is extremely important. But yeah, we started writing a standalone law. It was a strategic decision. We thought it might be easier to have a new, let's call it small law passed through the parliament than opening up an existing very large law that a lot of different stakeholders or actors would find relevant, and if opened up, they would want to have their say. So yeah, we managed to do that. In the meantime, we were also gathering a lot of public support to really show this is not some 1 or 2 or 3, 5 NGOs or informal networks that would like something like that, but really that the general public recognize this is very important. Maybe I can later share with you what we did. So we had that ready, and now, as I started, there is a new government, so we're kind of hoping all these possibilities opened up. During or before the election period, we were very active, talking with all candidates, with all political parties. And I don't know if that's a good indicator. We always learn we cannot trust anything until it happens, but all parties that are now in the government included housing co-ops in their individual party programs, and also now into the government coalition contract. And also the ministers that were now just appointed and will be responsible for areas connected to this also give very high support. So conditions look good. If anything will happen, we will for sure keep working on that to make it happen. But in the end of the day, it will really fall down to, let's say, to political will.
So, thank you, Rob. And I wish that finally you will pass this law. But anyway, even that all you said, as you said, that it was included in their program of all the parties, the housing co-op, something so niche as a theme to become mainstream, it's a huge success. So congratulations anyway. We will move to Zuzi and then discuss all together. Hi, Zuzi from Budapest.
Hi, nice to meet you all. So I will also briefly share about our experience here in Budapest, and then I guess we will talk about MOBA after the others have also had a chance to speak. So here in Budapest, well, maybe I will explain a little bit where we are now with our organization and what were the previous steps. So our process started about 10 years ago with a group of people that initially the idea was to organize housing in such a way for ourselves and for people who are around us or who come, well, people who are coming to join the group because of their interest to live in cooperative housing and not because they wanted to facilitate this. And it was a very long process learning about the different kinds of solutions and legal possibilities and the very limited financial possibilities. And then about half a year after we established MOBA, actually, we managed to buy a house here in Budapest. And legally, it's really not it's not the form that we would want to have for the next houses, because it was kind of this very pragmatic solution that we could manage at that time. And we had thought that that after the first one, it will be much quicker to establish next ones, but actually it wasn't so easy in the end. And then about 2 years ago, we decided that it's important to put more capacity on the facilitation aspect and like professionalization in a way, because people who want to live in cooperative housing, they don't necessarily want to acquire all the skills of how they can organize it legally and financially, and they are looking for support to find other people who would be interested in this form of housing. And so we started to put more energies on developing this capacity for facilitation. And so we established an organization last year, which is called the Alliance for Collaborative Real Estate Development. And here, one of the main aims is to facilitate the development of new cooperative houses, but not only. And the idea is also that we can do, and we are already managing a space that is a non-residential collective space, kind of like a social center with a bar and office spaces and workshop spaces. And the idea with this organization is to facilitate the creation of different kinds of collectively owned and managed spaces. And they can be workspaces and community spaces and residential spaces as well. And the residential aspect is, well, we imagine that as cooperative housing projects. And so that was, I think, the most recent development on our side. And we have been putting now for the past 1 year a lot of time and work into finding new buildings that could be developed into housing cooperatives, and also organizing people who are potentially interested in this form of living. But it's a very, like, what we are experiencing is that it's a very, very delicate balance, and well, maybe this is something we can discuss at the end, but the market situation is becoming very difficult everywhere. We always think it was very difficult, and then it gets even worse. And so now it's becoming super difficult actually to find properties that and under the financial conditions that we have here in Eastern Europe, which are not favorable at all, because you can't really, there are very few banks who would lend at all to these kind of projects, and even they will not lend on a long term, just a short term. That makes it very expensive. You have to rely a lot on the financial resources of the members and on people who are supporting the network. And so in this combination, it's difficult to come up with affordable housing prices that the residents will have to pay. And so we're always kind of balancing between this. And there were several houses actually where we didn't go forward with the project because it turned out that the monthly costs would not be affordable enough for the people that we want to work with. Because then, of course, there's the option that you just go ahead with the project, and then maybe it will be higher income people who move into it, but that's something we haven't wanted to do so far. And so it's, yeah, I think it's also an interesting question, what kind of properties you can develop, because I think, well, often, some of the groups also in MOBA are thinking a new build, and then definitely I think you need to have some kind of massive, I don't know, grant money or involvement of a public entity that will make it cheaper, because it's very expensive to construct, especially in the current context. And then we are looking at renovations of existing buildings, but even then, and that's an architectural question in a way, that our experience is that you need to find properties that are somehow weird, or that are not, that can't sell so well on the market, because if they do sell well on the market, then they will be sold very quickly under the market conditions that we currently have, where everything is happening very fast. And with this kind of collaborative, horizontal decision-making process, and also because we don't have a lot of cash on our bank account that we can directly pay, we will not be able to make decisions about buying a property in, I don't know, 2 weeks' time, like an investor would. And so because of that, we need to find buildings that are complicated legally, or that are not so, I don't know, attractive for an investor or on the market. So that's this kind of delicate matrix, I think, that we have been experiencing, and then we've really like processed a lot of buildings in the past year. Yeah, I don't know what else I should talk about. Maybe the process aspect, that it is a very long process. I guess that's something everyone talks about in this field, that you need to talk a lot with different people, different stakeholders, and it's a very, very slow process to kind of get it get this whole idea out there in the public discourse, and also people who you want to engage, for them to understand on a deeper level what it means if they put their savings into this kind of housing. How will they be able to get it back? What decision-making capacities will they have? So these kind of things take really a lot of discussion and a lot of workshops with people who are interested, and so you have to be patient in this whole process, I think, and that's difficult sometimes. And there's also, I think, this very interesting question that we've been experiencing a lot recently, is this issue of who takes the risks of deciding to move forward with a project. And because there's the group of people who will want to move in, but realistically that group of people is going to change until the very last moment, actually. And so I think if already you have a core of a few people, 3 or 4 people who are committed, then it's already a good thing, and then you will find other people along the way. But now what we are seeing is also that since we have this facilitation entity now, people who are interested to participate in the project, they would like to put the responsibility of decisions as much as possible on the facilitation entity, which is normal, because they say that they don't have such a deep knowledge of this model, or it's a complex process. And but then I think a facilitation entity can really take on all the responsibility of deciding about going forward with a project if there is a lot of money raised into the organization, or if later on in the decision-making capacities this is reflected in some way. So that's also, I think, an interesting question. Once you have more than one house, what's the relation of the local entities and the local groups and this umbrella organization or facilitation entity? Yeah, maybe that's it in a nutshell, and then we can go on in the discussion.
This association that you mentioned, the facilitation organization, is this that you mentioned in the interview, that it would be like an umbrella organization of the houses, or something differently altogether?
Yes, it's the same, just it doesn't only have the function of being an umbrella organization, but also of facilitating new projects.
So it's not going to be another association it's this association that all the houses will refer, the future houses will refer to this organization. Is because we had a workshop previous in the morning, we were discussing about the legal forms, and it's interesting what you said now. And also the number of people that are pushing forward the project, that it's 3 dedicated people, which is very interesting all for us, that we're trying now, we are here with a group that is also interested to proceed with a project. And also that
sorry, can I say something? I didn't say it's the ideal thing to have 3 people. I'm just saying that I think that realistically, in each case, the group that starts a process and the people who will move into a house is going to change a lot. And I think there's this a difficult situation around the decision to start a project. And if you try to make this decision with everybody involved who will potentially live in the housing project, then it's not going to happen and it's not going to be possible. And so I think you can make a decision already if, I don't know, maybe not 3-4, especially if it's a big project, but maybe 1/3 of the future inhabitants are very committed, and then you can take the decision of going forward, and then the other inhabitants will kind of join in the process, I think.
Okay, now it's working. So now we can, maybe you want to ask any questions or in the chat. Okay. So we have a question to Anna, which is connecting different cooperatives is very interesting. And how do you make them interested? What kind of proof of trust and what do they gain? Anna?
Yes. Well, it is interesting that this connection has started from another entity, which is called Coalition for Development of Solidarity Economy. And we have started to work closely with them in the last year. And they have been mainly looking at social enterprises like companies with this kind of social purpose. And somehow cooperatives were dropping out of this framework. And then we realized that actually we should, or they realized that they should put the cooperatives also in focus. And now through this communication, actually these bridges between cooperatives started to happen. So it was some kind of lateral entrance into the topic. And maybe I can just mention that apart from housing and energy, we have also cooperative or group which is interested to start a cooperative for people that have unstable work or freelancers, let's say people that don't have employment. And in some way, this is quite interesting for us because this is also a group that is from the beginning, when we started thinking of a housing cooperative and working on it, this was one of the groups that we thought it has a natural connection to cooperatives because they cannot go to the bank and ask for a mortgage. They have less, let's say, security. And so these kind of bridges are becoming therefore interesting. I see that there is solidarity funding. Not yet. This is all in quite early stages, so not yet. But we can talk about that on the level of MOBA. So that's another another scale.
We cannot hear anything now.
Maybe you hear us now? Yes.
Now, yes.
Okay. We are very
Maybe it's interesting now to open a little discussion on MOBA. We have, I should say that the activities that we did with each project are uploaded on YouTube, and you can find there.
Sorry, just to interrupt you. The sound is very echoing, so we cannot really hear well.
You should mute one of them. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
No, it's okay.
Dora?
Very, very artistic.
Okay, now you hear me.
Yes.
Perfect. So maybe now we discuss a little about MOBA. Because it's very interesting that these projects gain more power through this MOBA network. And I would like you to say a little bit about what MOBA could offer to a small group from Greece, for example, that is now starting its first steps and how you could help. Okay, you said it in the interview, but you should, maybe you should repeat here for the group that is, and all the people that would like to hear. You heard me? Okay. So who wants to start? And maybe the Prague's paradigm is also inspiring, and you could talk about this a little.
Maybe, as Anna doesn't want to start, maybe each one of us says a little bit how we see MOBA could help potentially anybody. And maybe, sorry, I joined a little bit later, so I don't know how much you already said about MOBA, but the original idea from the MOBA came exactly from this. How can we help each other? Yeah, so small groups, informal or formal networks from these post-socialist or post-transitional economies came together, realizing that we have first all housing issues in our country. We all identify housing co-ops as one way to address them, not as the only way, but one of. And thirdly, we all have certain challenges, a lot of them related to the fact that mechanisms or models like this don't exist. So, you know, initially coming from the idea that we, despite having similar challenges, we are in different areas on different levels. So one might have some mechanisms or idea related to finance a little bit more developed, the other group a little bit less. The other has more ideas about or solutions for architecture, the other less. So we're kind of looking from these discrepancies and trying to learn from one another. And you know, in a very primitive form, but then as things evolved, we started developing different kinds of solutions together that could help everybody. So to start where we actually started, maybe developing thing like Open FRM, so financial resource management tool, which is in essence a very complex but very boring and interesting at the same time Excel sheet that helps us understand what the financial needs are and how the money flows and what kind of sources we will need, how this will impact the project, the rent above all, and our possibility to repay. This was one tool that we developed together, and it is extremely useful for all the groups within. And because we have this mentality or conviction that anything we develop should be open sourced, this is a very apparent example of something that anybody can benefit from, just having access to that. But you don't need to, become a member of MOBA. You just visit our website and download it. Where it becomes a bit more useful to become a member is, of course, getting support in figuring out how is it actually useful, this tool. So this firstly, and this leads me to the second thing, which is just access to the knowledge that we have developed up until now, opportunity to learn from one another. I think this is also a very important resource in a way. But the most, something that people might see as most useful as we progress are two mechanisms. Firstly, the MOBA World Habitat Grant, and second, the MOBA Fund. The MOBA World Habitat Grant was established through support of World Habitat Network, and it's a non-refundable grant, which is aimed especially at smaller or a bit less developed organizations that are more early phase and might need different kinds of support to figure out different things, whatever it might be, related to establishing a cooperative or figuring out the system. And it provides small sums of money to help you with that, just to find time and resources to work on that alone or to find external support. And with that, automatically always comes also support from other MOBA members. And the MOBA Fund, which I think we mentioned already a little bit, which is then, as you progress a little bit further, we are building this joint solidarity pot of money, in essence, that is made available for projects that might need help purchasing land, investing in construction, or buying a house at very favorable loan conditions, so meaning very low interest rates, especially compared to, as Zsuzsi already suggested, financing conditions that are unfortunately present in all our countries. Maybe this is where I would stop for now.
I would maybe add one more thing, that because I think Rok summarized the practical benefits of MOBA quite well, and maybe one more aspect that is less practical, but in the midterm I think it can help us all, is this bigger visibility that we can have thanks to MOBA, and bigger credibility, I think, in the eyes of different actors, in the eyes of international actors, but also in our different local contexts. It's a point of reference that we can use in a way that we are part of this bigger international organization. And then in different like international housing networks, we are recognized because of and through MOBA, I think. And there's also like this year we are also conducting a research project together, which is interesting, like to better understand the target groups for our housing models in the different countries that we are active in and in the whole region. So that's a new kind of collaboration that we didn't have before.
So it is interesting to hear more about this research program. If you want to give us a link, Zsuzsi, if there is a link for this in the chat. And also, I would like to ask if, okay, MOBA as a European Cooperative Society exists since just 2 years. Have this bigger support of this MOBA network helped you in the local context? I mean, you have used it to approach municipalities saying that you are a member of this bigger MOBA network.
You mean if just being the part of the network has helped communicating with public actors?
Yes, I mean, if you have used this towards the public actors, if this has helped you to approach them more easily, I don't mean with an agreement, just if they recognize the value of the status and prestige of this network, European network.
I can only speak now from our side, but on very direct level, I wouldn't say it has very directly impacted that. But, you know, being able to make them understand this is not something that is isolated in terms of a challenge and in terms of a solution was definitely beneficial when trying to convince people and make them understand why things like this are important. There were also some direct levels. Look, for instance, why every time we organize meetings, we try to organize face-to-face meetings if possible. They're unfortunately very resource wasteful, but they're also very beneficial. We also try to have some public events, not necessarily to convince decision makers, but just, you know, to share with the general public the experience of MOBA. But we also sometimes invite then decision makers, and of course, in such an international environment, it becomes more appealing to them potentially. So in that way, we can also help. But we should not pretend that MOBA is already, although I am certain one day it will be, such a big, powerful international player that just by being part of MOBA would make drastic movements possible.
Maybe what is interesting, just to add, that we have been, as Zsuzsi said, I think it was more important on the international level than on the national level. For instance, we are part of CoHabitat network, which connects all sorts of organizations that deal with housing across the globe. We are also quite active in the Cooperative Housing International, although we are not official member, but we have been present on their meetings, had the sessions together. This is also the first network that we reached through to contribute to the MOBA fund, which now has also a small addition to the MOBA Accelerator Fund, which also explains what it's meant to do. So it is meant to accelerate projects to give a contribution, financial contribution, when no one else is ready yet to contribute. We will, for instance, be present on the International Social Housing Festival in Helsinki in 10 days as a part of CoHabitat network, and as part of cooperative housing on the gathering in Zurich in September. We have been 2 weeks ago in Barcelona on the annual conference of Federation of Ethical and Alternative Banks on the European level. So this really gives us an entry point, I think, and we can, let's say, represent the interests of this region through these events.
So
maybe one more benefit of being a MOBA, I just started thinking about when Zsuzsi was talking about this research, which is another thing I would find very, very valuable. This is not necessarily a strategic advantage, but maybe a tactical approach. When you're starting up a cooperative, it's very important to, no matter how you approach this, to have certain agreements and discussions with different stakeholders. If nobody else, there will always be some financial actors involved. If you're a group that has just started, that has a lot of things yet to figure it out, first, it might be very intimidating to approach a large financial actor. And it might even be a bit negative because, you come with them asking about potentially to finance your project. They see that you still haven't figured out a lot of things. It might be a deal breaker already there. I'm not trying to discourage anybody, but I'm a person that gets quickly scared. So this is something I would be afraid of. If being a part of MOBA, doing research projects, it's much easier. You come there as a researcher, trying to figure out what is available, how to benchmark this country or this actor to other international networks. And through that, you can learn a lot and then evolve and then later approach them with your particular interest or your particular product. And it might also make them more prone to a discussion with you if you represent some international network, not just some small informal group from local environment, unfortunately.
Yes. Is there any question here from the audience, or we have other two discussants, Silvia Cafora from Torino and Martina Theodoropoulos from London? We have one question.
I want to ask for a comment more than a question. Hello, I'm Maria. I don't know if you can see me. It's nice to see you again. So a lot of, usually we talk about housing cooperatives and we start talking about funding, networking, legislation issues and stuff, and not the everyday life and problems in a cooperative. So, but today in the morning in the workshop, a large part of the ending discussion was about who gets to vote in the assembly, to what capacity, on what issues. Does its apartment, its household get one vote? Then my concern was, what about the inner household dynamics, women, men, children? Do they get a say? So I wanted a comment from you on your experiences in that personally and as a cooperative, if that's possible. Thank you.
Maybe I can start to respond to that, but the thing is that our house that exists here in Budapest, it's a very small one, so I won't be able to, explain about any complex voting processes, because we have this very simple system that we have a house meeting once every 2 weeks, and we decide on things there. I don't think we've ever voted. No, we have actually during the renovation when when we needed to make a lot of decisions like every day about, in the process of a renovation, you can't foresee everything. And then there's this decision that, okay, in an hour we have to decide, like, I know which tile we're putting there, or do we break that wall that much or that much? And there, in that process, we were voting because we often didn't agree, and there was no time to deliberate too much. But since then, we haven't really ever voted. So I think in a smaller group, it's quite easy to, reach a consensus. And to be honest, we haven't really developed these kind of rules for a bigger house yet. We always say that these kind of decisions would be up to the group that moves into the house finally, because I can imagine different, maybe you will have a house with, I don't know, a lot of families with children that will work differently in terms of decision making than if you have a house with single elderly people or any kind of combination. So my approach would be to leave these kind of questions of deliberation to a later phase when you already have a developed group.
I can only agree with what Zsuzsi said. And we, from our side, we don't even have a house yet, so it's, I would love to deal with questions like that, but we just have a simple approach. This is something we learned from other attempts. We're not the first and the only one in Slovenia trying to do this, but there were some 1 or 2 examples from the past. Unfortunately, they never able to buy or construct a house, and more or less they died out. We tried to learn from them, see why this happened, and one of the things we tried to understand from that is they promised a lot, they could not deliver immediately, and then just people start ignoring that, So what we want to do is have everything in a way bulletproof, and then say, look, this is what we can deliver, these are the conditions, would you like to be a part of that? And yes, I think so. In terms of these rules, like you mentioned, voting and other administrative or the things related to democracy, should fall on the groups that will actually be living there. But I also think it is important to set in advance certain values that you find as important, or as are not able to just ignore or forget, and based on those defined certain rules that cannot be ignored as well. So that you, in a way, already kind of at least give in the broadest sense, some boundaries how the cooperative and the group living there should operate, and then they find their own most optimal systems to work in that. It's in a way the same with MOBA, you know, we are a diverse group with different views, but certain views are, you know, I don't know the expression, we simply cannot ignore, and we all recognize as valid. Out of those, for sure, is things like fighting against speculation, non-speculative approach, democratic approach, community-based, accessibility in terms of financial accessibility, etc. And these are just some values you have to, if nothing else, write down in your statutes. And these are the guiding principles for you then.
Is there any other question from you? Okay, no question. So we go on to Sylvia and Martina. Sylvia, you first. Yes,
Ciao.
Don't disappear.
Hello to everybody. Thanks, Constantino, to invite me, and thanks to everybody to welcome in the great MOBA. I quickly introduce myself, and I'm Silvia Caffora from Milan, Turin, Northern Italy, let's say. I'm an activist for housing, and then I'm a researcher at the Polytechnic of Turin. And so we took, I say we because we are a little group, we took some years to dedicate to the research in order to understand how can we bring alternative models also, alternative housing models also here in Italy, where we have the same problem, we share the same problem of the ones you have already mentioned. And if you want, I can briefly show you the situation we have in Italy. I don't know, tell me what do you prefer? Maybe just a frame of what can Italy, what can we do in Italy and what we are doing maybe, because well, in Italy, to frame the Italian situation, we have a long tradition on one side of welfare state that are based on familiar co-housing, familiar sharing, sharing of communal spaces for life, and also of sharing of duties, and also like we have this approach, of course, as you know, the same in Athens, the same in all the Balkans, I think. And then on the other side, we have this long tradition since the end of the 19th century of that started from workers movement of mutual help in order to create housing cooperatives that were managed by the workers themselves, and that then developed along the years a long tradition of the one we call the red cooperatives, because we're belonged to the left wings of our politics. And so this is a general frame, and then it happens that during the years, with the market, the regulation, the law that allows to privatize the housing cooperatives, the social fragmentation, and so on, this system that was very mutual, very community-led, has little by little went to a different way. And so now what we have, for sure, we have a legal, from like cooperative are recognized from a legal point of view, and also so the public actor recognize cooperatives, credit institution recognize cooperatives, and also from a social point of view, everybody is very close to the cooperative way of thinking. And then on the other side, communal life is rooted, as I was telling you, in our culture. And so in the 2020, we did an interview and asking if you prefer to live as you are living in apartment and inside this solution, or if you prefer to live or to develop new models, more cooperative, more shared and communal situation. And the 43% of the interviewed choose this second. So this is a kind of a frame. Then at the moment, we have just finished a first step of a mapping campaign of collaborative housing, and we were looking at co-housing project developed by communities and by the public actor. And the situation is that Italy has a very dotted landscape of this project. There is no any network, there is no any model that community can follow. And so in Italy now we have between North and Central Italy, we have 28 projects of co-housing, 5 are public, and the other are community-led. As there is no any model, no network, no nothing, this project had many difficulties to be developed with a long-lasting process with an average of 7 years in the production. So this on one side. And then on the other side, there is a new attention from the cities in the production of tools to support those alternatives, and also to co-produce projects, like the city, just to mention, of Bologna, Milano, Trento, and Turin. And then some of these cities started also a confrontation with European cities like Barcelona, Zurich, and Vienna in order to exchange some possibilities. Now, on the 17th of June, we will have a first roundtable with the cities, with the housing division of the cities I mentioned, in order to put them all around one table and to start a comparison and a confrontation. Because as Rocco was saying, also for us, it's very important working with public, because we think that is one strength that we need to develop in order to produce the public tool, law, and project that can be useful to develop. Just one last thing is that I'm also part of a national network for the commons, and we are working toward this direction too, in the production of process and models for use of the commons. So how to use, from one side is the legal framework that is a cooperative, and then on the other side, how can we make it work? So the use of commons, of building stock, land, and territories. And we are also producing tools together with the public actor that like the first we have produced and we are using is a pact of communities of collaboration that helps us to start using buildings and land to produce collaborative and cooperative. And well, this is more or less the situation where we are, and we need a lot of work.
It worked. Sylvia, thank you. This pact that you mentioned in the end, it's something that is already in the law, something that has been in
yes.
National legislation?
Yes. now everybody in Italy can use this pact, this community pact, and actually it is used mainly in urban areas like Bologna. In Milan we use a lot, in Trento, yes, in Torino too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the provisions for the communities are that they have some the provisions for the communities, the benefits from this pact is that
the benefit is that the benefit is that communities can use these commons. Like in Naples, I'm sure maybe you have heard about ex asilo Filangeri. This is a big public building, totally restored and abandoned. And several years ago, a group of this national network of commons started talking with the local administration, and finally they decide to start using it without any fee, without any leasehold and nothing. So starting this way to regenerate urban regeneration through cultural and social use. So this is the thing.
Okay. Yes. Τώρα
Hi, thank you. It's a question, it's to you, Sylvia, since you emphasized the communication and role of municipalities, but also Rock that emphasized the role of public actors in this. And I just wanted, maybe now or maybe later on following the discussion, if you could tell us what are the main, let's say, instruments or claims towards the public actors. So how do you ask them to support cooperatives, and how is this institutionalized in legal frameworks? Well, the basic lines. Thank you.
Rocco, would you like to start with the aggregator?
Sure. So maybe I also wanted to say earlier, but I then forgot. The way we approach this is not necessarily a matter of copy-paste to other countries. For us, it's especially important to work with public actors, even more so because, and also important for us to create a new law, because it's not legally and practically possible to do certain things in Slovenia for now. To give you a very apparent example, like accessing land as a cooperative, even though you would define yourself in your statutes as non-profit organizations, even though you would be bulletproofs in terms of non-speculation, and even if you would for 100% promise you will deliver or you will rent out apartments for non-profit price or cost-based rent, you would not get any additional support from anybody. You would be viewed exactly the same as a market actor. Yeah, and this is very important for it to change. This does not mean everybody else in every other country has to follow the same path. You can have very, very different approaches to that. In your case, it might already be possible for the state or the municipality or anybody else to recognize, aha, you are doing some benefit to the broader society or the environment, so we can give you a favorable loan, we can give you the land for free or for a better price. In our case, it's not possible. That is why we have to work on this. And in terms of how to convince them, well, there are many ways to do so, and also how to approach them. For us, it was always easier just simply to write to them, to call them and ask for a meeting. I know it's not maybe so easy in every country. There are other ways, maybe organize a big flashy conference and get them there for media attention and address them in that way. Just some random ideas. But it's really important to have to make them understand we have a huge problem on our hand, the housing crisis. I don't even want to call it housing crisis anymore because it's so much more systemic and prolonged. the state is not doing anything, or if it's doing, it simply does not have resources to do anything. So I think it should be quite easy in a way to make them understand where the benefits of the housing co-ops come from, and also how they are safe in terms of protecting the public interest. And I think if you manage to succeed in convincing them in that, it is at least a starting point to start actual discussions on how to cooperate, how to get support, etc. I don't know if this answers your question. Really hope it does.
Yes, from our side, yes, like we are starting, like one thing is go and meet exactly the local administration, and then the other thing is to create a moment of sharing among different administration that at the moment are favorable to the construction of these alternatives, in order to start in the favorable places to build something. And then so it is what happened in Naples. We had a very, very favorable administration, and we were able to produce this, so to open a space for local society, for local communities, and we started to produce these new legal tools as the patto di collaborazione. And then we replicate it in other places. So this is our approach at the moment. And then other thing is like to bring comparison with cities that are many steps beyond us, like Barcelona, Zurich, etc.
Maybe just to add one more practical thing, it doesn't mean you always have to go to the mayor or the prime minister or anybody in that level, you know. It's just figuring out who you should get attention from on the long run. It might be just a simple board bureaucrat somewhere in some office, and you just go and talk with them, and just getting somebody from the inside that starts to listen from you and build on the long-term support, it can be very helpful. It can also be very helpful to, again, on the long run, try to create public awareness and public support, because it will then in the long term also be easier to convince decision makers. Yeah, they will see this is not just an isolated project, but something the general public likes or even starts to demand from us. And also, you know, it might be that it doesn't work in a certain neighborhood, it doesn't work in a certain city. Then it might be a strategic matter of trying to find some other local administration that will want to do this, at least to showcase, to make a pilot project and show how this is good, how this is possible, the benefits of it, to demonstrate the process, and then others can copy.
Maybe just to add something, because we are now, I totally agree everything that Rock is telling, and our situation here is very similar. Although we have long cooperatives, and even some kind of provision for cooperatives to deal with non-for-profit housing, there is really no practice. And we did also legal studies and are currently doing also to point at what all sort of obstacles you are meeting as a housing cooperative, which wants to, in a non-for-profit and non-individual ownership way to develop housing, what you all come across and what all has to change legally. But I maybe just wanted to add another dimension to this, because to make this upscale become like spread and go beyond pilot projects, what is also necessary is to develop a collaboration with financial institutions, or not collaboration, but conditions for financial institutions to support these sort of projects. And that's where, for instance, this research project that we are doing now on the level of MOBA comes as a very important. Because one of the things that we realized in the very beginning of MOBA, that there are no banks that are ready to finance cooperative housing in our regions. And that's, for instance, why one of the first steps that we did was to really start to talk about financing also to develop this tool for calculation that can help us to understand our projects, to build a common portfolio with which we can approach banks, but also to approach banks at a high level. So one of the first things that we did was, for instance, to talk with the headquarters of Erste Bank, which is an Austrian bank which operates in all MOBA countries. Now, this is really very specific, I think, for our region, is that there is this dominance of foreign banks all across. For instance, in Serbia, we have only one bank which is not, which is national, and all the other are foreign. In some other countries is maybe a little bit better. So that's why we were, for instance, reaching out to Erste, because they all have a social, let's say, banking department, and they operate on the level of entire MOBA. So instead of like reaching locally to the local Erste Bank, we decided to go to the higher level, so that if there is any change made, that it is made across the entire region. And one of the things that happened, since it's not ideal, but there is one change that happened, is that they introduced a new institute of something which they called quasi-equity finance, which is this bridge loan that they give then possibly also to cooperatives, not only, but to some kind of social businesses, at the point when there is no yet any other institution that wants to, let's say the initial 20%, for instance, you can get through this. So this is one of the things that became important for us. And now within this research project that Zsuzsi was mentioning, we are actually doing interviews with financial institutions, and maybe Zsuzsi can tell more about that. But it is part of this, let's say, endeavor to open up the door of financial institutions as well.
I don't know if I should, or I think Martina still needs to talk, doesn't she?
Yes.
But we can come back to this financial aspect, and we can talk about it a bit more after.
Yes, I think we can talk after we hear also Martina, because her experience is also interesting. It's the only North European paradigm.
Islander.
And it is
from
another...
the island.
Ah, yes, now from a boat. She will speak from a boat. So Martina.
Hello, it has been great today, although here is very windy and I feel a bit seasick by now in the boat, but really thank you very much. It has been very inspiring and very interesting from all the speakers. My name is Martina Theodoropoulou. I have been living in the UK, in London, for on and off 15 years. I have been living in one of the oldest housing co-ops for 4 years, which is called Sanford Housing Co-op, and I was a development officer there. And for the past 4 years, we created the Community Land Trust, which I will talk about, this Community Land Trust. And so I have a little presentation, which I will try to have. I have very bad internet connection, so I apologize for whatever you see. Can you see?
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Our community land trust is called Community Assets for Society and Housing. It's a community land trust based in Southeast London in the borough of Lewisham. We were incorporated in 2018, and basically what brought us together, it was the fact that we were all living in different housing co-ops, that their history is normally coming from political squads in London in the 70s and 80s, and then they started incorporating and becoming legal entities and have rights in their home. So we met each other, and we realized that there are a lot of resources that we have in common, and how we could pool these resources of all the different housing co-ops in London and starting by Southeast London, that are many. And in respect of knowledge, skills, but also finances. My housing cooperative had and has £1 million assets in the bank account that is doing nothing. And many other co-ops have more or less, not similar, but quite a big pool of money. So we were thinking, since we are appreciating and we are living the benefits of communal living, which is mutual aid, solidarity, and cheap rent, affordable rent, which is very empowering, but at the same time, a network in London. So we incorporated in 2018, as I said, as a non-charitable community benefit society. And we started getting, let me see if I can move, no? Ah, yes. So we started getting grants. It was a time that a community-led housing hub in London, which is part of the greatest London authority, had created this hub to fund initiatives for community-led housing. The National CLT Network, and we got a local grant as well from Deptford Challenge Trust. In order to start to incorporate first, we used this money for incorporation, and also to develop a site search tool, which is a bit primitive, but actually we mapped out all the abandoned land, garages, and buildings that could be prosperous and possible to refurbish or build on. We had two groups as well, one in very different scales. The first scale of a very small incorporated newly co-op that had no money. And then we had a very long-standing co-op that its members were aging, and they were looking for ground floor flats instead of staying in multi-story buildings. So we started doing capacity studies of, as Susie said, looking for non-desirable land, or a bit difficult, so not for the developers to be interested, so that we have time as well, because it takes time. So we had the capacity studies, then we employed Catalyst Collective, where they did the research for us for the different models and which model actually would suit us after a lot of interviews, a lot of questionnaires, because we were a new group as well, and we were coming from different angles through cooperativism, but we saw it differently. So we ended up with Your Space, which means that cash would reach up to development, up to pre-development, basically, will get the funds and secure the land. And the cooperatives would take the mortgage and get the building in that case, and be responsible and take the risk for that. So that was our approach. Then we had, because of the COVID and these 2 years that we couldn't increase our membership, we did outreach in different ways. We were doing summer picnics, January blues socials, we did some film screenings, and we tried to engage as much as possible with the borough and the neighborhood. Our vision, always self-management, empowerment, people-centered control, a different kind of world. We are members of workers' co-ops as well. And yes, get in touch, this is us, hi. But the biggest question and our biggest interest is how to get all these different co-ops. We have been very hesitant of how to approach them because we are coming from them and we understand how protective they are as well of their assets. Yeah, it's interesting to discuss and understand how we are making now our document texts and how to approach them in a way of literature. Yeah, we are on that stage that we are finishing our business plan and financial strategy and finishing our document texts to start talking to co-ops directly. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Martina.
Yeah.
It was a discussion, this theme of the community land trust, we discussed in the collective interview of MOBA. So it would like now to see the synergies between these different types of approach to collective ownership, communal ownership, etc. Maybe we have all of you to discuss about this relationship to the public authorities and the initiatives, the local initiatives. Jussi, that you wanted to mention something before?
Well, where we left off, it was more about the institutions and how we want to approach them with this research, but I would be happy to reflect on this community land trust idea. So just maybe first to finish the previous, or what Anna was asking about. Well, in the research, we are going to do interviews with financial actors and then do these stakeholder engagement workshops with them, because we kind of had this idea with MOBA in the beginning that we can, get around, or at least some of us had this idea that we can get around public actors since they are so unwilling to engage with us, and then we can only just go and convince a few financial actors and to give us favorable conditions, and then we can develop our models only with that. And now I think with the very strong price increases everywhere in the region, this is becoming more complicated. And I think now we are I think the Ljubljana group always had this emphasis on the public collaboration, but I think now with the context becoming more difficult, we start to realize more how this is an important aspect, because otherwise it becomes very expensive. And maybe just to link up to the idea of CLTs, it would be a very convenient way to practically imagine this collaboration if the municipality would give us land and we could build cooperatives on it, and then since we didn't have to buy the land, it would make it more affordable. But for that, we have all these different, at least in the Hungarian context, very strict legal barriers, because like Rok was saying, we don't qualify as any kind of actor who could receive beneficial public could receive this kind of public subsidy. So they would not give it to us for free, and then in the end it doesn't become, like in this case, it's not cheap to use public land if you have to pay a rent for it that is not low. And also there's the legal obstacle that the separation of the land and the building is not used. In some of our countries, we have the possibility, if you build a new building, to have this separation. But then if you have an existing building, it's not really possible to separate them. And also, since it's not used, there's very big mistrust with this kind of legal situation. And then if you cannot do this separation, then it's complicated to make a community land trust. But I think the idea that is behind the community land trust, that a part of the real estate is owned by some kind of umbrella organization, and that is what makes it more affordable. So on an abstract level, I think this is the main point in a community land trust. I think that is interesting, and the way we think about it in the different MOBA organizations is that maybe in the future, either the national umbrella organizations or MOBA itself could hold a part of the real estate in the long term and not ask for a return on that part, and that could make it cheaper. But this is something we haven't developed at all. But I think it's inspiring to hear about these experiences of CLTs from other parts of Europe, you just have to tweak it a bit to a different legal context, I think. And sorry, just one more, maybe a remark to Martina's presentation, that I really like this idea that older cooperatives contribute their financial assets to support the development of new ones, because this is something we are trying to build on in MOBA, the solidarity aspect of cooperatives, and we have approached, I know, old ABIZ, one of the oldest Swiss cooperatives. They gave us some seed funding to develop the MOBA fund 2 or 3 years ago. And this year we want to continue this and approach long-established cooperatives in Western Europe to support our development in some way. And then if you do that within one country, it becomes perhaps even easier or more understandable.
There is Radical Roots in UK. I don't know if you know them, that they had created a fund called Rootstock. So if you were a member of, depends on the membership status that you are in the Radical Roots, you could access a funding pot, which was called Rootstock. And it was separated for voting issues, so that whoever is investing on this Rootstock doesn't have any voting rights into the cooperatives. So it was kind of a safety structure. But that was kind of a solidarity fund, because whoever is benefiting from this fund or could potentially be benefiting is a member too. So this is another way of seeing it as a solidarity funding. But I'm wondering as well, what are the tiers? How are you thinking about the solidarity fund? Do you have it tiered? And depending if it's an organization or if it's an individual, or is it membership, one-off? How would you think of solidarity funding?
Yeah, Rootstock, we know them, and we have been consulting with them quite a lot, actually, about the MOBA fund. It's a very nice example, I think. And as for the solidarity funding, this one that we received from ABIZ, it was just a grant, because they have this international solidarity grant system where they support initiatives that are close in their functioning. But now we are developing a proposal, have a share, that the possibility to buy a share in MOBA, and we have a system where you can be a full member, like our organizations are full members in MOBA, but you can also be an associate member. And so the idea is to be able to become an associate member if you invest and if you buy a share. But this is something that is currently being developed, and the different options that can be linked to that.
But the access to the fund itself is for the members. So, and members are, the full members are only organizations, they are not individuals.
Maybe any questions from you? Okay. I wanted to ask Sylvia if they were thinking, if they think that MOBA would be a solution, MOBA membership for any Italian initiative.
Yes, like as soon as we are more tied here in Italy, for sure we will tell you something more precise, and it would be great. Yes, and anyway, we will be in Helsinki too. So if maybe we will see in person. But yes, like we think that, of course, like joining the forces and being under a same umbrella, as Susie said before, it could be very important also for us, because if we are kind of little dots working hard, And if we are, it's the same metaphor of the big fish and the little fishes that create the big ones. So for sure, we would be little ones joining the big. Would be great, yes. And I've got a question for Martina about community land trust, because we are studying also like the trust model, the community land trust, that is actually an Anglo-Saxon, it is inside the Anglo-Saxon legal frame. So it is harder to bring it down here, even if in Spain they are already working on it. So we are waiting to see what they are elaborating with this. But it is very interesting, the fact of dividing the land from the property. It really produces much more affordable rent or affordable construction cost, developing cost. So this is one point that for sure we also in the Mediterranean or Eastern Europe area, we will be able to find this way of separating the two goods. And then I've got a question. I'm sure you know the Liverpool Granby for Street Community Land Trust.
Which legal tool, sorry?
It is a project that is, the name is Granby for Street Community Land Trust. And it is, it is old...
Silvia, you want to write it in the chat also?
It is very famous.
Granby.
And also, Anna, this quasi
Granby.
thing.
Granby.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Granby, sorry.
Yeah. Yes. That's actually some friends of mine, they work on this project. That was actually one of the. That's the thing. What we are doing with CAS is a bit different from how the first community land trusts started in London, in UK. That's why I think it's taking us more time, because it's more big scale. Normally, the community land trusts were created for one project. It was very project specific. And in Granby, in Liverpool, it was for this specific street, like the neighbors, and it has exactly, and Russ and Lewisham. I'm a member as well. It's like we are 5 people. Circulating. No, I'm joking. No, it's just that when it's project specific, it makes sense, and it's much easier to get it running. You have the site, you have the intention, and then you're moving into addressing the different either public, private actors, whoever is needed to be addressed, funders. With CAS, our problem is that we are living in housing co-ops, first of all. So we don't have the need of housing. So it's always like finding as well, it's a bit chicken and egg. Sometimes we did all the site search. We found some very promising sites, but we didn't know for whom. And then we found the 2 different scales. That's why it was good to exercise with 2 different types of co-ops. One that is established and one it's new, to see the different challenges. We are getting there, but normally community land trust was created for one land. So we're figuring it out as well.
I find your idea really interesting. I think for MOBA on a longer term, this what we have been discussing at MOBA could hold land in different countries where the members are, could be really, I mean, it's a long-term thing, but I think it's really interesting. And that's where the fund itself can really have a very direct purpose.
Yeah, because the idea is to take it away from any speculation, and you are the holder of this land. Yeah, in Sanford, that's the thing. It's the same challenges everywhere. Land is very expensive. Property is very expensive everywhere. And if the public, we were funded by Great London Authority, but when it came to the table, we went to the table and speak to the public authority of Lewisham to give us some land as Sanford. We are 70s, we are 50 years established housing co-op. And the site would be the extension of our land. It was adjacent, nobody else can build there, but they wouldn't give it to us with the funder, who is from public authority, present. So it's very difficult and a bit discouraging to go through the public, in my opinion, like how I've seen it, to go through the public authority way, because in UK at least they're powerless. In London especially, they're powerless.
Okay, still it is an image from the future, Martina, that you talk about community land trusts with backup in the bank in hundreds of thousands. So we wish for MOBA the same, to become something like quite big. And so we are closing now, but before we close, I would like to, because we speak about all these projects, and also you have formed this European Cooperative Society, which is quite heavy in organization work, how you share this work between you, and maybe because we have to work now on a project in Greece, maybe your insight would be useful for us to. How you share this work? I mean, there are specific roles. It's volunteer work, or to talk. It's the backstage information.
European Cooperative Society is a specific legal form which exists on the level of European Union, and we have been looking at what is the context, the best context of our countries to establish it. So we did establish MOBA in Croatia because of the possibility also for the cooperative to have a non-for-profit status. So that was our choice for that reason. And the other one is that around Cooperative for Ethical Finance, which was one of the initiators of MOBA, there is a whole network of cooperatives developing a knowledge on cooperatives, from how do you manage legal documents to how do you set up legally organizations to how do you, let's say, manage accountancy. So that was one of the reasons to do that. And then MOBA has full members and associate members, and full members are the cooperatives or the initiatives that want to establish alternatives to market-driven housing. Not necessarily all are cooperatives, so there are 5 so far. And we have 3 associate members, which are Urbamond, World Habitat, and ZEF, which is this Cooperative for Ethical Finance. And the full members have a vote, while the others are present on the meetings, but do not have the right to decide, although their voice is very much heard. And then MOBA has 3 members of the management board and 3 people in the supervisory board. And Rok and Darovan, who is not here, and me are in the management board, and Zhuji and 2 other people are on the supervisory board, for instance. And then we have committees which are meeting for different works. So, for instance, we have on the MOBA grant a group that is deciding on the which is managing, let's say, the projects, and also on the funds side. And then we have working teams which are developing the different things. For some of this work, we got grants and funding. For others, we don't have money to cover it. So now we're looking like how to make at least some kind of basic fees for people not to do this work entirely volunteer. But I have to say, it's like really juggling around how to cover all of this. So yeah, it's a quite complex, and I think what was very important for us from the beginning is that we were really had this quite often in-person meetings, like each 3-4 months. until the COVID started. Our last, let's say, meeting in that period before COVID was really literally when the COVID was starting, just like 10 days before the pandemics was announced. And then the period online was quite difficult because of the energies of people and the difficulty of not being together. And now we are really happy that we are starting again in meetings in person. So we had in Budapest in the end of last year and in February in Belgrade, and now we're meeting in the beginning of July in Zagreb. So we are picking up again on these live meetings, which are really like very hands-on meetings. They are the points when we decide on things, when we put our energies again together and push to the next period of a few months until we meet again.
Okay, this is where we would like to end somehow, because in the interview you mentioned this energy of the meetings, and it's so important to meet in person, and we would like very much to have you here in Athens. We hope to meet soon, or we would wish also to be in Zagreb somehow. And I think this was something that Mark and Rock also mentioned in the interview, that said how we can keep this energy of the live meetings, of the live presence, the energy of this volunteer thing, of this pioneer thing, when we become big institutions, when you become big institutions, actually. A big challenge. So this is, I think, the closing. Dimitra, you want to add something, or Maria? Okay.
Just to take the microphone to say thank you, and it's a pity that we're not close to continue discussion in a more relaxed way, and hope really to meet you at some future meeting and keep the networking going. And I'm sure that many of the people here would really have many questions to ask you, but it's certainly difficult through the Zoom. So we will really try to keep this contact going and this exchange going, because it's really valuable and inspiring. So thank you for your time and for being here. So we will, well, till the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.